One of my favorite games growing up as a kid was Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights, a PS2 platforming game that didn't have traditional levels. Instead, it had a large map with various platforming challenges, which were sectioned off into multiple areas. As a dumb little 5-year-old in 2003, that was a pretty new concept for me. I was so used to the Sonic the Hedgehogs and Crash Bandicoots of the era that the concept of a game with no traditional levels seemed pretty unique and cool to me. And not only that, but you could also warp back to other points in the game using warp gates to more easily navigate the game world. My first experience with the concept of fast travel. Upgrades and power-ups were nothing new to me at the time either, but locking certain sections of the game behind extra abilities and power-ups certainly was. Suddenly, I was backtracking to other areas of the game to not only progress, but to also get collectibles I missed the first time, as they sat just out of reach, with no way to get them until later. It wasn't until I was much older that I realized that I was not just playing a fairly open-ended Scooby-Doo platforming game. I was playing my very first Metroidvania, and to my knowledge, the only Metroidvania Scooby-Doo game they've ever made. As if that wasn't enough to help it stand out, Night of 100 Frights is probably one of the most lovingly crafted games of its license, as its visual style, tone, audio, and presentation are all incredibly faithful to the original 1969 Scooby-Doo Where Are You series. Developed by Heavy Iron Studios and published by THQ in 2002 for the PlayStation 2, it became one of only a fraction of the over 3,000 PS2 games to surpass 1 million units sold, beating out juggernauts like Silent Hill 2. That's not to say that Night of 100 Frights is, fantastic or anything, but I do think it's worth noting just how much this game, as a licensed kids game, stood out from the crowd at the time. The setup is pretty typical. Scooby and the gang show up to investigate the disappearance of an eccentric inventor, who is the uncle of Holly, a friend of Daphne's. After the gang splits up, everyone is captured by the villain of this caper, the enigmatic mastermind, with the exception of Scooby himself, so, off you go to save the gang. It's overall a pretty lonely adventure. Scooby is the only playable character throughout the game. But Scooby does come across one particularly notable NPC. The groundskeeper provides hints to Scooby throughout the game, but also the occasional sarcastic wisecrack. It's also rather appropriate that the groundskeeper is voiced by Don Knotts, a well-known actor from the era the original Scooby-Doo series was produced in. The character's face is clearly even modeled after Knotts' face. In fact, this isn't even the first time Don Knotts has appeared in a piece of Scooby-Doo media. He appeared in 2 separate episodes of the new Scooby-Doo movies. His inclusion is a nice touch, which makes the game feel true to Scooby-Doo history. The whole game is pretty true to everything pre-1980s Scooby-Doo, actually. The environments are filled with desaturated hues of blues and browns, making them feel organic but also desolate and abandoned, much like the original show. It's all appropriately spooky without being too overbearing. I mean, obviously, it's not going to be a scary game. It's Scooby-Doo. No one has ever been scared by an episode. So like I was saying, the music also feels like it's ripped straight from the original series. From the use of brass, xylophone, guitar, and bass, right down to the cheesy lyrical tracks during the boss fights. One of these tracks even samples from The Monkees, pulling further from the era Scooby-Doo was conceived in. Stuff like this makes it feel like the game was developed in some type of weird alternate reality, where the PlayStation 2 was actually released in 1979 when Scooby-Doo was still new. There's even a laugh track throughout the game too, both in cutscenes and gameplay.
Now I know what a rubber band feels like.
Because why not? It's the only video game that has Don Knotts in it. Of course there needs to be a laugh track. Who composed this soundtrack anyway? Tommy Tallarico!
Gaming racist.
Being a Metroidvania, Scooby will platform through various segmented areas before coming across a power-up, which will open up a pathway in a previous area where he can then find another power-up. That cycle repeats itself throughout the game, and while you will come across the occasional boss along the way, the game's core structure tends to stay the same. It's nice that the core platforming opens up as you continue to play. Scooby starts off with a simple jump before gaining a double jump, glide maneuver, and even a thunder slam move. I especially appreciate how the thunder slam keeps you in the air before slamming back down. It creates a nice risk and reward if you just barely miss a platform. But you also need to collect enough Scooby snacks along the way to unlock snack gates, which lets you progress through to more areas. The threshold for how many Scooby snacks you need for each snack gate gets tighter and tighter, which means the game encourages exploration more and more as you play, which is something I appreciate. Exploration is inherently fun, since Scooby controls well, and the game's level design is pretty decent overall. You even have fun instances where Shaggy shows up for the occasional gimmick like an auto-scrolling level, or levels where he throws you high up into the air. There aren't any levels here that I would consider to be frustrating or mind-numbingly simple. It's a comfortable difficulty for kids without feeling like it's patronizing to the young audience the game is aimed towards. But for as comfortable as the levels themselves are, I don't know if this would be the absolute best game to introduce kids to the Metroidvania genre. Power-ups open up new areas to explore, but rarely is it clear which area to go to next once you obtain a new power-up. More often than not, you'll have to stop by an area you've already been to before. And to the game's credit, it does tell you what power-up you'll need to get past a given section. But it's basically up to the player to remember which power-up needs to be used where once they obtained it. I know it left dumb little 6-year-old me lost and confused as to where to go next. Oh wow, I got the spring power-up, now I can double jump, wow, that's so cool! Now what? It's nice that the levels start off short and simple, keeping the pace of the game swift and making you feel like you're always making progress. But halfway through the game, and especially in the ship graveyard areas, the levels become longer and a lot less forgiving. Bottomless pits and large, slower areas tend to become the norm, and if you die, it's right back to the end of the area with you. I at least appreciate that you can keep any snacks you collected along the way, but it's still not fun having to do this all over again if you make a single mistake. Some power-ups are also just a bit superfluous. Like, did we really need 2 different power-ups which allow me to sneak past enemies when it's almost always just faster to run past them or defeat them before they even have a chance to attack? Did Scooby need 2 versions of the Thunder Slam? Did we really need 2 different power-ups which let Scooby walk up steep inclines and let him walk on goo? The best power-ups are the ones that immediately change his core moveset, and aren't just glorified keys to another area. Bosses in the game are fine. The Black Knight fight is pretty picky with when you're able to attack it, and I often found myself abusing iframes to attack the hit button in time before he moves away. Green Ghost is pretty much just RNG and is also pretty picky when it comes to timing. And the Redbeard boss fight just has you avoiding attacks and killing enemies 4 times in a row. Typical 6th console generation kids game stuff. The battle with the Mastermind is definitely my favorite. A 2-phase fight which sees you battling multiple different enemy types which require different attacks to take down. The Mastermind is also just a joy to watch on screen. He only appears a few times throughout the game, and, well, to be honest, he doesn't really do that much. I would probably find him pretty lame if not for his excellent design and Tim Curry providing the voice of the character. It's a great performance, and I was always excited as a kid whenever he showed up. It's deviously charming stuff. I mean, listen to that laugh and tell me Tim Curry wasn't born to play a Scooby-Doo villain. Bringing it all full circle, I think what made this game so appealing back then, and why it was so successful, was just the charm of being the closest thing to a playable episode of Scooby-Doo Where Are You? It looks and sounds exactly as it should be, and features a whole bunch of villains from the original show as enemies. It's just oozing with that classic Scooby-Doo charm, which, by this point, has been basically scientifically proven to be appealing for the past 50 years to pretty much everybody. Yeah, I know, I'm basically answering the question as to why this game outsold Silent Hill 2 with just, hey man, it's Scooby-Doo, bro. But it's probably the most Scooby-Doo a Scooby-Doo game could possibly be. Or at least the most any Scooby-Doo game I've played to date has ever been. I haven't played every Scooby-Doo game, so, you know, fake fan. It's even got Scooby-Doo trivia in the Monster Gallery to test your Scooby street cred. How neat is that? A Scooby-Doo monster wiki before wikis were even a thing. Wait, is this Monster Gallery entry referencing Genie? Like from I Dream of Genie? Okay, this game was definitely developed in a secret underground lab in 1972 and wasn't released for 20 years, alright? This right here proves it. Plus, I mean, look, you could do this. How cool is that? And look, if you play the game on certain holidays, the vibe and the weather in Mystic Manor changes. You can't tell me this game doesn't have charm. I mean, I know Easter egg and secret showcases are more YouTube shorts and TikTok kind of things, but I thought it was cool enough to bring up, and you know what? No, never mind. This is a TikTok now.
So here's a neat little thing about one of your favorite games growing up that you might not have known about before. The game is Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights for the PlayStation 2, and depending on if you're playing the game on certain specific dates, you can actually trigger special events in the game you would not be able to see otherwise.
For example, if you just so happen to play the game today on July 4th, the mansion in the beginning of the game will be accompanied by fireworks along with red, white, and blue fog. Pretty neat, right? In addition, if you play the game on Christmas Day, the mansion will be met with a gentle snowfall. How festive. Meanwhile, if you set the date to January 6th, Scooby will be
Oh fuck, oh shit!
Storm the Capitol, Raggy.
Scooby, please stop, don't do it, turn the date back!
Gotta find Nancy Pelosi, Raggy, gotta find her.
No, Scooby, no!
So can I recommend Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights? Well, I can definitely say that if you're a Scooby-Doo fan and you've never played it before, then yeah, you're doing yourself a disservice by skipping it. This game is practically made for you. And given the fact that probably every person on this planet has, at some point, enjoyed a Scooby-Doo thing, then I guess that means I'm recommending it to everybody on Earth? Yeah, sure, why not? This is now a Scooby-Doo channel, and I give Night of 100 Frights 10 out of 10 Don Knots. Hashtag Scooby Sweep. Okay, video over now, bye. Support me on Ko-Fi if you want.